Have you ever driven a vehicle that completely changed your expectations, not just a little? Not just enough to make you say, "That's pretty nice," but enough to make you stop and ask yourself a serious question. How is this even possible? For decades, pickup trucks followed a simple formula. Build them tough, build them strong, make sure they can tow heavy trailers. Haul equipment. Survive rough job sites, and that was enough. Comfort came second, luxury came second. Ride quality came second. If you wanted a smooth ride, you bought a sedan. If you wanted luxury, you bought an SUV. If you wanted a truck, you accepted the compromises. Or at least that's how things used to be, because then something happened. A truck arrived that challenged almost every assumption people had about what a pickup truck should feel like. A truck that made owners of luxury SUVs take notice. A truck that made long highway drives surprisingly relaxing. A truck that made competitors rethink their entire approach to suspension design. That truck was the Ram 1500. Today, many enthusiasts claim it's the smoothest pickup truck ever made. Some say it rides better than vehicles that cost far more. Others believe it completely transformed the full-size truck market. But is that reputation deserved? Or is it simply clever marketing mixed with loyal fans? Today, we're taking a deep dive into the Ram 1500. Its history, its engineering, its strengths, its weaknesses, and most importantly, whether it truly deserves its legendary reputation. To understand why the Ram 1500 matters, we need to go back in time. Because for many years, Ram wasn't even its own brand. The truck originally lived under Dodge. For decades, Americans knew these trucks as Dodge Rams. And while they had their loyal supporters, they often lived in the shadow of giants. The Ford F-Series dominated sales. Chevrolet remained incredibly strong. The truck market was brutally competitive, and Dodge frequently found itself fighting for attention. But things began changing in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The Ram developed a bold identity. Massive grills, aggressive styling, powerful engines, a unique personality. It wasn't trying to copy Ford. It wasn't trying to copy Chevrolet. It wanted to be different. And buyers noticed. Then came one of the most important decisions in the company's history. In 2009, Chrysler decided to separate Ram into its own dedicated truck brand. The goal was simple. Treat trucks as a specialized business. Focus entirely on truck buyers. Understand truck owners better. Develop products specifically for their needs. Looking back today, that decision may have changed everything. Because from that point forward, Ram became obsessed with one goal. Building trucks people genuinely enjoy driving. Not just working with, driving. And that distinction became incredibly important. You see, truck buyers were changing. Years ago, most full-size trucks spent their lives hauling equipment, towing trailers, working farms, working construction sites. But modern buyers had different priorities. Many people were using trucks as daily drivers. Family vehicles, road trip machines, business transportation, adventure vehicles, commuter cars. And those people wanted something more. They wanted capability. But they also wanted comfort. That's where Ram found its opportunity. Now let's talk about the feature that changed everything, the suspension. Because if you've ever spoken with a Ram owner, chances are you've heard them mention one thing over and over again. Ride quality. Ride quality, ride quality, and for good reason. For years, most full-size trucks relied on traditional leaf spring rear suspension systems. Leaf springs work. They're durable. They're proven. They're excellent for hauling heavy loads. But they're not always ideal for comfort. Especially when the truck isn't carrying weight. The rear end can feel stiff, bouncy, harsh, unsettled. Ram decided to take a different path. Instead of sticking with tradition, engineers introduced a rear coil spring suspension system. At first, some truck enthusiasts were skeptical, very skeptical. Many people wondered whether a softer suspension would compromise capability. Would towing suffer? Would payload ratings decrease? Would durability become a concern? The answer surprised everyone. Capability remained excellent. But comfort improved dramatically. Suddenly, the truck absorbed bumps differently. Road imperfections felt less noticeable. Highway driving became smoother. Passengers became happier. And owners started talking. A lot. Then Ram pushed even further. The company introduced available air suspension systems. And this is where things became truly interesting, because now the truck could actually adjust its ride height. Higher for off-road use, lower for highway efficiency. Lower for easier entry and exit, more adaptable for towing. More adaptable for loading cargo. The system wasn't simply comfortable, it was smart. And for many buyers, it transformed the ownership experience. This became one of the biggest reasons why the Ram developed such a loyal following. Because comfort isn't something people notice only once. They notice it every day, every commute, every road trip, every grocery run, every vacation, every mile. And over time, those experiences matter. Now let's talk about design. Because appearance matters in the truck world. Maybe more than people like to admit, the modern Ram 1500 has a very distinctive look. It's muscular, confident, bold, but it also feels refined. The grille is large without being excessive. The proportions are balanced. The body lines look clean. And overall, the truck has aged remarkably well. Some trucks look aggressive. Others look luxurious. The Ram somehow manages to look like both, especially in higher trims. And speaking of trims, this is where things become very interesting, because the Ram lineup offers something for almost everyone. The Tradesman serves buyers who prioritize practicality. Simple, functional, work-focused. The Bighorn adds additional comfort and features. The Laramie introduces genuine luxury. The Rebel targets off-road enthusiasts. The Limited pushes deep into premium territory. And then there's the Tungsten, a trim that surprised almost everyone when it arrived, because it demonstrated just how far truck interiors had evolved. Step inside a modern Tungsten, and you're greeted with an environment that feels closer to a luxury SUV than a traditional pickup. Premium leather, beautiful stitching, large digital displays, metal accents, high-end materials, excellent craftsmanship. And this is where Ram deserves significant credit. The company understood something many manufacturers were still learning. Truck buyers wanted premium experiences, not just premium capability. And that philosophy influenced nearly every aspect of the truck. Now let's discuss engines, because no truck review would be complete without discussing power. Historically, the Ram offered several engine choices. One of the most famous was the 5.7-liter Hemi V8. For years, this engine became almost legendary. Truck enthusiasts loved it. The sound, the character, the torque, the effortless acceleration, the confidence while towing. Everything about it felt distinctly American. The Hemi wasn't just transportation, it was personality. Press the accelerator and you knew exactly what lived under the hood. And while fuel economy wasn't always its greatest strength, buyers often accepted that trade-off, because the experience felt worth it. Then came the eDork system. This mild hybrid technology added additional efficiency and smoothness without fundamentally changing the truck's character. It wasn't designed to turn the Ram into an economy car. Instead, it refined the driving experience, improved start-stop performance, added low-speed assistance, enhanced overall smoothness. Exactly the kind of improvements daily drivers appreciate. More recently, Ram began moving toward newer powertrain strategies. And while some traditionalists miss the Hemi era, the reality is that modern engines continue delivering impressive performance. The key takeaway is simple. The Ram has never struggled to provide power, whether you're towing, passing traffic, climbing mountain grades, or simply merging onto the highway. Performance has rarely been a weakness. In fact, many owners are surprised by how quick these trucks feel. Because modern pickups have become incredibly sophisticated machines. They're no longer slow work vehicles. Many accelerate faster than sports cars from previous generations. And that's a remarkable transformation. But power alone doesn't make a truck great. What matters is how that power works with everything else. The suspension, the steering, the cabin, the technology, the overall driving experience. And that's exactly where the Ram begins separating itself from many competitors. Because while other manufacturers often focus on numbers, Ram focuses heavily on feel. How the truck feels when you drive it. How relaxed you are after 3 hours on the highway. How comfortable your passengers remain. How quiet the cabin stays. How refined the experience becomes. And in many ways, that's what defines the Ram 1500. Not just capability, Not just horsepower, not just towing, but the feeling it creates behind the wheel. And that feeling is exactly why so many people believe it might be the smoothest truck ever made. But comfort alone doesn't determine whether a truck is truly worth buying. So far, we've explored the history of the Ram 1500, its revolutionary suspension design, its evolution into a premium truck, and the reason so many owners describe it as the smoothest pickup they've ever driven. But now comes the part that matters most. Because no matter how impressive a truck looks on paper, there is one question every buyer eventually asks: what is it actually like to live with? After all, most people aren't buying a truck for a single test drive. They're buying years of ownership, years of commuting, road trips, family vacations, weekend projects, unexpected repairs, fuel bills, maintenance appointments, and thousands upon thousands of miles. This is where a vehicle's true personality begins to reveal itself. And in many ways, the Ram 1500 shines brightest right here. One of the first things owners frequently mention is how quickly they become accustomed to the truck's comfort. In fact, that's often the biggest surprise. The first drive feels impressive. The second drive feels relaxing. But after several months of ownership, something interesting happens. The comfort starts feeling normal. And that's when many owners make a mistake. They forget how different the truck feels compared to many competitors, until they drive something else. Then suddenly the differences become obvious again. The suspension absorbs imperfections. The cabin remains quiet. Long drives feel easier. Passengers remain comfortable. The truck simply feels less tiring. And that's an underrated quality, because fatigue matters, especially for people who spend significant time behind the wheel. Business owners, contractors, travelers, families, retirees exploring the country. For these people, comfort isn't a luxury. It's part of the ownership experience. And the Ram consistently delivers. Now let's discuss interior quality, because this is another area where Ram dramatically changed expectations. Years ago, truck interiors were simple, functional, durable, but not necessarily impressive. Today's Ram 1500 is a completely different story. Open the door of a well-equipped Laramie, Limited, or Tungsten model, and you'll immediately notice something. Attention to detail. Soft touch materials, quality stitching, premium trim pieces, large displays, thoughtful design. The dashboard feels modern. The controls are intuitive. The layout makes sense. And perhaps most importantly, the cabin feels expensive. Not because of flashy gimmicks, but because of execution. Everything feels intentional. Everything feels designed for comfort. And when you compare it to some competitors, the difference becomes obvious. The Ford F-150 offers excellent technology. The GMC Era offers outstanding luxury. The Chevrolet Silverado offers strong practicality. But many buyers still believe the Ram delivers the most inviting cabin in the segment, especially at higher trim levels. Then there's the technology. Modern truck buyers expect a lot, and honestly, they should. Today's trucks often cost as much as luxury vehicles, so expectations are high. Fortunately, the Ram generally performs very well here. Large touchscreen systems, wireless smartphone integration, navigation, premium audio systems, digital instrument clusters, multiple camera views, adaptive cruise control, blind spot monitoring, lane keeping assistance, parking aids, remote start. The list continues growing every year. One feature that receives consistent praise is the available Uconnect infotainment system. For years, many reviewers have considered it one of the easiest systems to use. Menus are straightforward. Responses are quick. The interface feels logical. And in everyday life, that matters more than flashy graphics. Technology should make ownership easier, not more complicated. Now let's address towing capability. Because regardless of comfort, this remains a truck. And trucks need to perform truck duties. The Ram 1500 handles this responsibility very well. Depending on engine choice and configuration, towing capacity can exceed 11,000 pounds. For many buyers, that's more than enough. Boats, campers, trailers, ATVs, construction equipment, small business needs, the Ram handles these tasks confidently. What's particularly impressive is how composed the truck often feels while towing. Some trucks become unsettled. Some feel nervous. The Ram generally maintains a sense of stability that inspires confidence. Part of that comes from engineering, part comes from suspension tuning, part comes from overall refinement. The result is a truck that feels capable without constantly reminding you that it's working. And that's a compliment. Now let's talk fuel economy. Historically, trucks have never been fuel efficiency champions. Physics simply works against them. Large bodies, large engines, heavy frames, big tires, but modern engineering has improved things considerably. Depending on the powertrain, the Ram can deliver respectable fuel economy for a full-size pickup, especially during highway driving. Of course, real-world results vary. Driving style matters, terrain matters, load weight matters, weather matters, but overall, fuel economy is generally competitive within the segment. Will it match a compact sedan? Of course not. But compared to other full-size trucks, it performs reasonably well. And for many buyers, the comfort trade-off feels worthwhile. Now let's discuss reliability, because this category can make or break ownership satisfaction. The truth is that reliability discussions often become emotional. Every brand has loyal fans. Every brand has critics. Every manufacturer has success stories. Every manufacturer has horror stories. The Ram is no different. Overall, modern Ram 1500 models have earned a reputation for being reasonably dependable when properly maintained. Regular service remains critical. Oil changes, transmission maintenance, brake inspections, fluid checks, routine care. None of this is glamorous, but it matters. A lot. Some owners have reported electronic issues over the years. Others have experienced suspension-related repairs, particularly with air suspension systems. And yes, repairs can sometimes be expensive, especially once warranties expire. However, it's important to remember that modern trucks from every manufacturer face similar challenges. Today's vehicles contain enormous amounts of technology, touchscreens, sensors, computers, cameras, electronic control systems. Complexity has increased dramatically, and complexity occasionally creates problems. The Ram is not uniquely vulnerable here. Neither is the F150. Neither is the Sierra. The key is realistic expectations. No modern truck is perfect. The goal is finding one whose strengths align with your needs. And that's where the Ram performs well. Now let's compare it directly against its biggest rivals. Starting with the Ford F150, the F150 remains the benchmark. There's no denying that. Ford offers tremendous variety. Multiple engines, hybrid options, numerous configurations, outstanding towing capability, huge aftermarket support, and decades of proven success. For buyers focused on flexibility, the F150 remains incredibly difficult to beat. But when it comes to ride quality, many drivers still give the edge to the Ram. Next comes the GMC Sierra. This is perhaps the most interesting comparison, because both trucks target buyers seeking refinement. The Sierra feels premium, sophisticated, comfortable, luxury-focused, especially in Denali Ultimate trim. However, many reviewers continue praising the Ram's suspension tuning and ride comfort as slightly superior. The difference isn't massive, but it exists. Then there's the Chevrolet Silverado, practical, capable, straightforward. The Silverado does many things extremely well. But when discussing comfort specifically, the Ram often receives higher praise. Finally, we arrive at the Toyota Tundra. Toyota brings something powerful to the table: reputation. Many buyers trust Toyota reliability, and that's understandable. However, when evaluating ride comfort and interior luxury, the Ram frequently earns stronger reviews. Each truck has strengths. Each truck has weaknesses. But if comfort is the primary goal, the Ram consistently remains near the top. Now let's talk about who should actually buy this truck, because not every vehicle fits every person. The Ram 1500 is ideal for buyers who want a comfortable daily driver, a capable towing vehicle, a family-friendly truck, long-distance travel comfort, premium interior quality, a refined ownership experience. It's especially appealing for people who spend significant time driving. If your truck serves as your primary vehicle, the Ram becomes extremely attractive. On the other hand, buyers focused exclusively on maximum towing capability or specialized work applications may prefer certain competitors depending on their needs. Again, there's no universal answer. Only the right answer for each buyer. And now we arrive at the question that brought us here. Is the Ram 1500 the smoothest truck ever? Honestly, there's a very strong argument that it is. Few trucks have changed expectations the way the Ram did. Few trucks have influenced competitors so significantly. Few trucks have earned such consistent praise for comfort. And even today, years after redefining the segment, it remains one of the most comfortable full-size pickups available. Does that mean it's perfect? No, no truck is. Some buyers may prefer the F-150's versatility. Others may prefer the Sierra's luxury image. Some may trust Toyota's reputation more. Those are all reasonable perspectives. But when you step back and evaluate the complete package, something becomes clear. The Ram 1500 accomplished exactly what it set out to do. It proved that a truck could be capable and comfortable, powerful and refined, practical and luxurious. And that achievement changed the truck market forever. So, is the Ram 1500 worth buying? For many people, absolutely. If your priorities include comfort, refinement, everyday usability, and a driving experience that feels surprisingly sophisticated, the Ram 1500 deserves to be near the very top of your shopping list. And if your goal is finding the smoothest truck you can drive every day, there's a very good chance you've just found it.